Okay, welcome to the post-show afterglow. Justin and I are going to kick back and kind of recap everything that we heard from Nick and put them into the course frameworks and show you a little bit about how Nick's story fits into building a mountain of leverage, how Nick built his mountain of leverage, and just pick out a few of our favorite ideas. Ready, Justin?
Yeah, we had a great conversation with Nick. He unspooled at length about his entire story and his whole journey. And so we have architected sort of the progression that he went through. And I think, Eric, you've got lots of thoughts on how it all fits together.
Yeah, I think his story is a perfect example of starting small and finding something that worked and adding leverage along the way, right? Which is like what we do. There's a lot of, I think, a lot of people get stuck around like when they try to skip too many steps at once. And Nick is an amazing example, like multiple times over of starting small, figuring something out, and methodically adding leverage.
Yeah, let me comment on that. I think it's a marriage of the sweaty startup idea, which is not necessarily like this traditional internet leveraged business. So he did services on the first half, but now he's such a talented communicator. So it's like sweaty plus communication equals leverage. I think that's like, for me, the big time zoom out. Now, when I say communication, I mean like media empire that he's building on the back half of the sweaty empire on the front half.
Yeah, it was very like, actually I showed the deck that I'm about to like use to go through this. I chose like the mountains of leverage. I think like he was very well along on building one just in the real estate world, and then like kind of stumbled into also building a thing that could stand alone in his media business, but they totally like reinforce and feed each other in some pretty amazing ways. He's so good at both of these things. You like uniquely good at multiple. So it's pretty impressive to see, and I think there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, and he didn't. The point that he made to us in the outset of our conversation with him was that it's completely nonlinear, and it's hard to predict it moving forward. But there's a series of decisions that you sort of teased out of him that he made over time that have worked out. Some luck, some super hard work, and just operational leverage, as he calls it.
Yeah, I think it was along that consistently iterative note. It's interesting that he never felt super. He never felt like he took a big risk, a big leap. Like from the outside, it looks very much like that. You're like, oh shit, man, you put it all on the line like a couple times. But from his seat to kind of go step by step by step, that's it's a great example of kind of how action reveals information, and just like it looked safer to him because of where he was and what he already knew because of what he'd been through.
Yeah. So he said, I haven't taken risk, comma, ever, period. And that's very interesting. On the other hand, I asked
I don't
him,
agree
was
with him
he
on
ever
that.
exposed? Like, yeah, I totally agree. But I did ask him, well, when did you feel the most exposed during this? And he said 2013 and 2016. 2013 had its own trials and tribulations. But 2016, guy runs a truck under a bridge, rips the roof off. Another guy has a diesel, fills the truck with diesel. It's not a diesel truck. Leaves the work site, etc. So
I wonder where he is now.
He'd worked his 40 hours that week, Aaron.
He was done. It had nothing to do with breaking a truck on a freeway and moving on. Yeah. No, I think Nick has definitely taken big risks. I think especially well. So let me get into the deck, and we'll kind of talk through this. So this if you're just listening to the podcast, you won't be able to come along on the visual journey with us, but if you're in the course, you will. Small accidental plug for the course there. So this I just want to kind of reset this framework. So basically what we were talking about is how people who have achieved incredible results slowly and methodically add leverage to something that they have that's working. They add new levers and they extend the levers that exist until they sit on top of this mountain of leverage that continues to compound and work for them. Nick's a great example of starting small and building there over the last like 10 years or so. And we're going to try to kind of pull out items of his story to show you how that all works. So his career basically started with $0 as a college student doing student self-storage and like just using what he had to like get cash basically, right? Like that whole process was like 2 weeks, make $8,000 with basically everything that was already sunk cost.
That's right. He didn't have to invest anything. He looked at, like, as you said during the podcast taping, he looked around himself, asked a simple rhetorical question, what do I have? And then picked it up and started applying it. So he already had a Cadillac Seville, and he had already had access to the Cornell printer network, et cetera, all the way around this circle.
And his lease and his buddy. So that's like his car is his tool, his flyers are his product, his sunk cost lease is actually his capital, weirdly. Like, and then his buddy down the hall, Dan, is his, people capital. And all it took was the two of them to make $8,000 in a week.
And it's worth it to just mention that all of his friends were having fun during that week, quote unquote finals week, which doesn't seem fun, but it's apparently the most fun in your junior year of college. And
as soon as you're done, yeah.
So they just hustled like crazy.
Yeah. And then took it. I mean, that's a good story kind of on its own, but like scaling that to 30 schools is fucking crazy. I can't imagine what it takes to like wrangle. Okay. So let's talk about scaling this up, like getting to 30 schools with this same business model, basically. So he rented a warehouse instead of just use his apartment, had to get some rental trucks and iPads. Those are the tools involved. Presumably just kind of scaled up his advertising a little bit, more flyers, more like, I don't know, maybe some digital ads a little bit in the beginning there. He had cash from operating, and I think you mentioned taking a line of credit out at the bank for operating capital. And then just grew up to 6 full-time employees and then 300 temporary employees, like during peak season. And that was to reach like 30 schools, I think you said.
Yeah, in 12 states. That's right.
30 schools in 12 states, yeah. Roughly
10 employees per city that they were operating in, and recruiting, training them. The level of quality needed to be high. The logistics were very tough to navigate, and he said it really wasn't about the money. We were trying to make money, but we were learning a lot about how to run one of these businesses.
Yeah, by operating in a brutal industry. This is a masochistic business. I think, so, but I think, I mean, the like napkin math, they must have been doing 100 to 200,000 in profits per year after all that. Because within less than 10 years, they had $700,000 after tax, right?
Yeah, so that's more than $1 million. Yep.
Yeah.
And the key here, one key, just a human side of this is, Ivy League degree from Southern Indiana, small town, a lot riding on, his reputation. His parents are proud of him, but then he goes and doesn't join the investment bank, just dives into this business and builds this lever for himself of capital. And it's just he talks about opportunity cost. The opportunity cost to him was, missing a year of time at Goldman Sachs, and
and like sleeping in the warehouse or living with his parents, or it was sacrifice. I think it was not a glorious first couple of years there, but this is like an undisputed win, even though it must have been tough sledding for sure. And so I think the next like chapter really started when he, they're sitting there looking at $700,000 in the bank of the business account, being like, we got to do something. We got to put this money to work, right? And they're kind of self-storage adjacent. And it sounds like his dad had some like construction experience before. And so they fell on the idea of building a self-storage facility. For context, like, which kind of blew my mind when I went back and checked this, like he was like 25 or 24 when he got started with this, which seems crazy to my memory of my 24-year-old self.
So I don't want to quibble. I think he was, so this is the craziest part to me. He said, "Hey Dad, I think we should build our own self-storage facility." And within 7 days, they put an offer in on a piece of property. So they had not identified any property, anything viable. They chose Ithaca, but the level of learning on real estate, tax, property, all of the things that you have to do to make that decision, to actually put in a hard cash offer on. And the key, I think, just what you mentioned is like they put their capital to work. They gave it a home, and then some.
And then some, right? So this is where I feel like I don't want to say bullshit, but like Nick took risk here for sure. Like objectively, he took risk. He took $700,000 in cash plus the 500 that he raised from friends and family and like kitchen table meetings, plus a bank loan of roughly 1.2 million on top of that, and put it all into a construction project to build a new self-storage facility and like start from 0 customers and go up from there.
Yeah, and plus the 25% extra that it was unanticipated because they went over budget.
Right. So yeah, which like if you can't get that, the first is all gone. So like this was a huge risk and a huge leap. He used a lot of capital leverage. And I also think, like to your point on all of the things to learn there, he used a lot of people leverage. So like he had family members who understood this process. He still had business partners. He had employees working for him at the student storage business. And in the construction, like any project this big, like you have brokers working for you to help you find land deals and help you manage the tax. You have like contractors who are bringing you plans. You have people who have built facilities like this before. You have vendors who are bringing their own domain expertise. So like it is also a great example again of like action reveals information. Like this, as soon as you put in that offer on the land, you're like, oh shit, I have a lot to learn. Like I'm going to go figure this out, or I'm going to find people who do. So I want to emphasize, like Nick was not like a prodigy, but he was super ballsy and aggressive and like put himself in a position where he had to figure this out, and it worked out okay. But there's also like versions of this where it did not go well, I think is like worth mentioning.
And I just don't want to lose the human side of this. If you're 26 or 24, whatever it is that I think it's 26, and you have $700K in the bank, it's very tempting to buy a nice car. And that's what he mentioned on the podcast taping.
Yeah.
He just didn't do it.
Yeah, no, he bought assets and took risk and, turned that first business into leverage for the next one, which is a huge turning point, I think, or a huge fork in the road, maybe, of like people who go different directions. Okay, so I think another super interesting like big leap past that is like he never built a storage facility ever again. He started buying them and operating them, and the slide that we're looking at now is a little crazy because we skipped a little bit of like buying the first one and implementing some systems and scaling up to, I think where he is now, 24 is the number I have off the top of my head, 24 facilities. But he's gearing up to buy $100 million of real estate in the next 12 months.
So I want to make sure that people know that this is not right after he operates his first one. So this is a 5-year gap. So he signs the lease in 2016, or rather he signs the contract to build his own unit in 2016. And 5 years later, now he's got an internal company bulk storage goal of 100 million to 12.
Yeah. So 5 years of basically like sourcing and buying small mom and pop storage facilities, often like undermanaged or kind of like on old tooling or underpopulated, and increasing prices and improving operations and improving the systems around the business and improving the advertising. So that is kind of like the competence that he built over the last 5 years, or the intervening 5 years. But let's take, so
There's
like,
a reason he went into this market. He said, dumb people making good money with bad practices.
there you go. Yeah. Yeah. So I think like once he got into it, things started like breaking his way too. Like he could raise prices more than he thought he could. Market prices were higher than he thought. The tools that he found and systems that he found were like enabled him to, rather than hire a full-time staff at each location, which is kind of industry standard, to get like one remote person to be able to manage 4 facilities was about the ratio. So some very impressive like operating chops in there, and implementing, SaaS tools and things like, there's another podcast that he was on where he talked pretty in detail about like the operations that he puts in place. Like one is an automatic gate, right? So like nobody has to be there. Nobody has to, like everything is just digital and automated, which is not the standard in this industry at all. So the like all of the tools that you can put to use, turning an old facility or an undermanaged or an unprofitable facility into something that is like, producing these kind of incredible yields for him.
Yeah, here's how he put it. People who succeed in real estate have something that makes their properties worth more to them than anyone else.
Yeah.
So it's just such a beautiful quote. And he can drive rentals. He's got better marketing. He negotiates the contracts for snow removal, like simple stuff where, a lot of these mom and pop enterprises, they know the people who are storing their stuff, and then they don't want to raise the rates to what's the actual market rate. They know the people who are removing the snow. They don't actually negotiate on price.
Yeah, they've been getting checks for 15 years, and so they just keep getting checks. Yeah, the like momentum of the business just kind of carries on as it always had. So let's do, and maybe we're almost to kind of wrap up here. I got a few other little bit of random ideas, but like we're over the over. So snapshot of like Nick Huber's mountain today as he gears up to spend $100 million or to buy $100 million of real estate. Crazy tool stack all around the operations, like we talked about: Asana, Slack, Dropbox, some sort of amazing industry-specific self-storage software. All the automatic gates and toolings around all the facilities. Then on the product side, and this is where we start to see like the merger of the media with the self-storage business, the real estate private equity business, is like every tweet he sends makes it more likely that he will find his next storage unit or find his next investor. His website, his advertising, which once he's got it for 24 facilities, how different is it going to be for number 25? He's got podcasts where he talks about what he's learning, advertises to business owners. He's got 5 years of checklists and procedures and call scripts, and all of these are kind of productized knowledge and experience that once encoded can be like duplicated into all of the additional facilities that get bought for next to no marginal cost, right? So that is where the product leverage comes in.
Yeah, he even just relayed a story about his team, how they the limiting factor for them to spend $100 million is the acquisition pipeline. Mm-hmm. And if that's your limiting factor, then you ought to have great checklists that have due dates on everything that needs to happen to actually acquire a property. Yep. So he's made that hyper efficient by documenting that process, and everyone loves it. Actually, they like to be told what to do, as he said.
His partnerships with bankers, he's writing letters to self-storage owners. He's making himself known as a buyer of self-storage. On the capital side, he sold his student storage business, so he's got a pile of cash from that. He refinanced some of the original storage facilities, like the one he built, So there's cash in hand from that. There's LPs coming to him, limited partners, so investors coming to him from Twitter or his podcast or his email or his community or whatever else he's got going on. And then I think he puts a bank loan, some debt on every deal. And so he's like putting a new pool of investors together for every deal for the most part. So there's a lot of capital leverage that goes into this. Like, he does not have 100 million in cash to spend on real estate, but he is pulling other people in, sharing that risk, and giving them some of the upside to participate in these deals. And then on the people side, like, still his business partner, Dan, who's come back over after they sold the storage business. He got 12 employees just working on the operations of all these units, and probably hiring ahead of acquisitions so that everything goes smoothly once things are acquired. He said 6 are just customer service reps, a couple in the Philippines, which is another operating advantage. Then a 5-person acquisition team. So that's just employees. And then we can talk about the 140,000 Twitter followers he has, who are basically deal scouts, and all of the karma network, as I call it, of people who he's helped. And,
let me give you another few data points. So when we talked to him, he had 17 employees. 6 months prior to our conversation, he had 6 employees. So it just shows the space, the rate at which he's actually going to be growing this thing. He said, Twitter has accelerated my career by 20 years. And so in terms of people leverage, he's like, look, through Twitter, I connect with Moses Kagan, Chris Powers, people who are mentors to him, doing it at a more scaled version. And he's just been learning. His rate of learning is super fast from that. So that's sort of the union of the product media side and the people side.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of ground that he's covered, he's basically done most people's whole career, most accomplished people's whole career in 10 years. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, he said something about my compressed learnings are 20 years of learning in 12 months, is what he said.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good. You got any other closing thoughts? I'm just overall I'm amazed by the story anew every time I think about it. Nick's I know he's a rough rap on Twitter, but a super nice guy and totally reasonable, sane outlook. His operating chops are amazing. I love what he's building. I think it's a really, it's admirable to find an old business like that, bring some technology and operating excellence to it, and then push leverage, and really move as quick as you can to cover all the ground. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, just 2 closing thoughts. First of all, he's an excellent communicator. You cannot argue that the guy can write, that he can communicate, he can lead, he can inspire people. That's how he got started, was just getting other people excited with him. Mm-hmm. And once he proved the model to himself, he just decided to scale it. And he's also not exposed himself, in risk terms to higher interest rates. He said, look, if interest rates go to 8%, I am able to keep all of my properties well within a threshold. It's just very interesting. And then one final thought is it's just unusual for someone in a highly competitive business like this to just share everything he's learning, literally to have a completely open playbook, fully transparent on Twitter and in public. And his business partner is totally fine with it. Dan is just go for it. And he has just shown everyone that doing that actually creates synergies, in his words, that are just hard to keep up with for other people. He shared everything, and it's just cool. He went on Reddit forums before Twitter. He went on Reddit forums and just shared all that he was learning. He would just get roasted relentlessly, build up a big skin, and sort of took that thick skin to Twitter.
Yeah, man. I mean, thick skin as a competitive advantage. That is, Nick Huber has that. And I think yours is a very good point. The second one you made, he is able to manage, he's very intentionally, intelligently managing long levers, and he knows he's managing them. Like, he's not piling on debt without understanding what it's, the assumptions that it's based on and how much it could push back, and without being sure that he can service that debt in a wide range of circumstances. So I think it is like, I mean, only time can tell. And like, it's not like we're underwriting experts or anything, but like, he at least seems like he's being a very, like, has a responsible approach to leverage and is not risking, the core of the business just for the sake of growth.
Exactly. Yeah. And we haven't even mentioned yet another thing on the media side, rather product, where he is building out a course. So, which taught him even more about what he didn't know. Yeah. So that course made 300 grand in very short time frame.
Yeah.
It's actually quite robust. He put a ton of work into that course. It's got a lot of documentation, everything he's ever learned. And he said, look, I thought I knew tax stuff until I started to try to teach it.
Yeah.
So that's just yet another competitive advantage. It's just how fast you can learn. And the fastest way to learn is to try to teach something.
Yep.
And now that's an asset that is just going to be, compounding for him.
Yeah. He's got a course and community around this, which really just accelerates his learning, I think, in it. It's a remarkable story. I think there's a lot to learn from a lot of different angles. We could talk about this forever, but we got to call it. Well, we got to call it somewhere. I hope y'all enjoyed the podcast with Nick. I hope you enjoyed his story. I hope you learned something. I hope this afterglow was fun and informative, and we'll see you out there.
See you out there. Thanks, Eric. Talk soon.
Later, Justin.